You go live.
All right. And looks live on Zoom. And now we're live on Facebook. Very good. All
All right.
right. Well, welcome back, everybody. It is 3 p.m. ish in Austin, Texas. It actually has a little speckle of sunlight. We've had a lot of crazy rain. I'm here. Yeah, I'm Melissa Katie, the Challenge Doctor, and if you're seeing me on the Challenge Doctor side, I'm cross posting it from the Change Physician, and I'm here with my co-host, Dr. Kevin Cuccaro, out of Oregon, and we are doing our Friday faves, and we're having a little busy weekend, so we're trying to squeeze this in and make sure that you hear what's happened in our podcast and what's coming and what our favorite things are for the week. You look like either
I'm
you're concentrating.
almost done. Because you're doing all this stuff. I have to share.
You have to do all your work on the
I have
backside.
to share it to my professional page, Dr. Kevin Cuccaro, and I have to share it to Straight Shot Health, which is my side thing. Just take some time, and then I have to share it to my friends and family, right? Because they are probably the people who actually watch this. So
I know. Yeah, anyone, if you'd like to chime in, we'd love to have a little bit of banter, and you can feel free to join our community at thechangephysician.com, whether you're a physician or a physician ally. And also, you can reach out to us and leave comments or rate us or review us on any of the podcast venues out there that you listen to The Change Physician. And we are coming up on our 100th episode, which kind of segues us into what's happened in the last week and what's coming this week. You want to chime in, Kevin?
well, yeah.
No?
Uh, No, I always can pretty much chime in on a couple different things. I wanted, because you were talking about like chiming in and everything, and what I find super weird. So I kind of looked at not necessarily stats, because haven't been following the stats, but just kind of look at views and listens and stuff. And people actually listen to our Friday faves, because I'm like, there was not 137 people on this day with us, but they do. So it's great to have you here. If you're not on a Friday, or maybe it's a Friday in the future, it's always fun, and I hope you enjoy these little things. If you have anything favorite, this is actually where they should chime in. On the Friday faves, you should be commenting on the video with what your favorite things are.
That's
Because
right.
not only will we see it, but then it also provides a little tool for your brain to start investing attention into those things that you want to invest more attention into. Which, if it is your favorite thing that Friday, should probably something that you want to do more of, or if it was a wonderful experience, something that you want to do again, repeat in the future, whether it was a birthday or maybe your family members or reading and things like that. So definitely chime in there and share what your favorites are. We would really enjoy to see that. But as for what is coming up, I'm looking at the list here and there's some blanks, so I can't remember what we did.
Oh, I didn't fill it in, did I?
I don't think
See,
so.
I'm not being a good co-host. Let me take that. Let me just make sure. What's that?
You can say it since I can't see them.
Oh, well, I'll just tell you. So actually, oh, I love it when my page is not popping up the way I'd like. Let me switch over.
All right. Well, they were discussions between the two of us, and we've actually been having some really good, in my opinion, obviously, since I'm involved with you. And so we have heavily biased opinions because they're directly relevant to us. But I've been really enjoying these discussions. And I think we're going to be seeing a lot more of them as we go forward, where we're taking like a individual bite-sized concept, whether it's a quote or paper, something that comes from some of the research or data around how your brain, how your body works, how health and relationships are integrated, and then having discussions on those. And I've really enjoyed them, and I'm hoping you've been enjoying them, Melissa, and I hope that the audience has been enjoying them. But at a minimum, I'm expecting to do more of them because I love them. I love our discussions. I'm really, really having a lot of fun with those. And I guess ultimately that's what makes a big difference is if we're happy, then we keep going. And if we're not happy, we don't.
Hey, so. That's the key there. If we don't even like to hear ourselves talk or talk to each other, then, this isn't going very far. But I would say episode 98 was, we talked about the value-driven practice, and then we followed up with episode 99 with what are your values?
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's very enlightening when you really think about, in fact, I'm putting it in here so we can find it. I think it's enlightening to because sometimes we don't realize what's driving us.
Yes.
And that is where it's kind of like, it reminds me of Charles Duhigg's book. Oh gosh, what is the title of it? Basically Why We Do What We Do, but it's a different title.
Book.
What's that?
It's his habit book, right?
Yes.
Charles Duhigg.
I forgot how the title
Power
went.
of habit. The power of habit.
So there's this like space between, like, you know, you grab a cigarette or you grab a donut or you grab whatever you're grabbing for. There's, if you stop for a second and try to understand, instead of like reacting to the feeling and knee jerk grabbing whatever habit you created to deal with that feeling or emotion or situation, if you can pause and really be honest with yourself, that little space, it doesn't mean it's going to make you change it, but if you can understand what it is that's really driving it versus, oh, well, I just like doing it. Well, there's probably a reason you do it. And so if people realize that something they're doing is harming them or having bad consequences, you can try to formulate something that is a substitute, you know, for that feeling. If something else helps you feel better for whatever feeling that is, whether it's anxiety, boredom, whatever it is. So it reminds me of that, because there's so many years and decades of our life that go by and we don't realize what's been driving us all these years. And anyway, I'm sure you have lots to say about that already.
Because you reminded me as you were saying that, because I'd forgotten, or I shouldn't say I hadn't forgotten, but it hadn't clicked until you said it about Duhigg's thing when he's talking about breaking the habit chain, kind of big, or I should say not breaking it, but if you recognize what the habit is, the stimulus response is, then you can insert so that you change. Once you know what the cue is and you're aware of the cue, then you can change the response, and over time you change it. But that is, I would be shocked if he had not read Viktor Frankl, because that comes from Viktor Frankl as well, where there's a very, very famous quote that he said, between stimulus and response, there lays a space, and in that space lies our freedom. And it is that recognition between what is an automatic behavior and what is an aware behavior. Yeah, and that fundamentally comes down to of how our brains work, is most of the time we're acting in this automatic way. That is like 90+%. That's like everything below the tip of the iceberg is all that behavior that is automatically driven, so much more than we typically expect or typically appreciate. And then that last little bit is the awareness piece. And we haven't done an episode of this, but I'd love to, is there's this whole idea of whether or not free will is a real thing. Because when they start breaking down people's actions and they start doing something, actually the intention behind the movement actually fires to the muscle group before the conscious, you became conscious of it. And from my reading on it, the only thing I could really figure out is what this, because I'm like, well, if that's true and there's no free will, then nothing would ever change. And then we're on this predetermined path, which we know that's not true. But what it started to really drive home to me, reading more and more about it and reading all the stuff on kind of automatic behavior, is everything is the more that you are aware, just like you said, and just like Duhigg said, and just like Frankl said, if you are aware and you see that little space, you can start now doing the small little conscious actions to eventually create an unconscious or non-conscious response. So now that you're moving down that path and building it in such a way to build those positive behaviors, that then, we don't have free will over in any way, shape, or form. So it's anyway, that's probably a little bit more than people want to hear on a Friday Faves, but lots of stuff there. So I was really happy that you brought that up. But second part about that, the value driven, the value episode came up again, and this is going to go directly into my faves for the week. And I mentioned this last week, but this book right here, oops, if you can see this. So this Think Again by Adam Grant. It's his newest book. He's a psychologist. I can't remember where he is, somewhere, one of those high-end places. He looks like he's 12, so it's always kind of interesting to me. But he had a quote, which I think I'd used, where he said, belief is something that you think is true. A value is something that you think is important. And if you kind of understand that in greater detail, it can start separating your beliefs from your values, because you don't want to be pulled into your beliefs. You don't want to be really driven by what your beliefs are, because beliefs can be associated with all sorts of bad things. But the values, and so the chapter I was reading today was discussing that a little bit more, about how important it is to be able to separate your beliefs from your values in such a way so that you can learn and grow. And he had a discussion with Danny Kahneman, who's like an amazing psychologist who has won the Nobel Prize for economics, actually, and he's a psychologist. But this discussion about your ability to pull away your values and not be so tied to your beliefs then allows your beliefs to be challenged in such a way that if then you find that the belief is wrong, you can change it and you can grow from it. And I can't think of a more important topic in this current day and age that we have than to be less confident in our beliefs and more confident in what our values are. And I think if people started identifying truly what their values are, we would find a lot more common ground, rather than the meow, 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 I'm going to put my hands over my ears. I don't want to hear this because you're touching on my beliefs and they're reacting. And I'm not even willing to approach those in any way, shape, or form. So anyway, that's my 5-8 fave. And that was my long dialogue.
What was the name of the author again? I'm going to put it in the comments.
Adam Grant.
Okay, I put it in there.
Yeah.
Perfect. No, I think actually that sounds like a great book to read. And it reminds me of, and I haven't even read this book, I have it sitting on my shelf to read. Was it about think fast, think slow?
Thinking Fast and Slow, Daniel Kahneman.
Yeah, and it makes me think of both of those are about having awareness, it seems like.
Well, they're about awareness and also about biases. So Kahneman's book, Thinking, and it's interesting because it's actually written thinking, fast and slow, because it's actually thinking, and then there's two different styles, fast thinking and slow thinking. It's not thinking fast and slow, which is the way I would read it for a long time. But that is a beautiful book, man. It is so good.
I need to read it.
That was another one. It took me almost a year to go through that book, because it's not only small print, but it was one of those you stop and you think and stop and think. And as an anesthesiologist, there is actually some mention of us in there, by the way.
Oh, really?
And particularly around pain and peak end rule when it comes to this stuff. But we are all biased. In fact, if you say you are not biased, you are the person I most worry about, because you're the most likely to be biased. You're unaware of your biases. We are all biased, and you cannot take away your biases. The only thing that you can do is become aware of them so that you can hopefully learn from them. But what Kahneman is really pretty adamant about is you can't eliminate them, and they will resurface again and again. And I think that's where that awareness piece comes in. He has another book out that I haven't started yet, called Noise, where he says thinking fast and slow is all about sort of heuristics and biases, well, the quick rules that your brain makes to make immediate actionable decisions, and then the problems and benefits of it, because there are obviously benefits evolutionary, other ways we wouldn't have them. And then Noise is a new book which talks about kind of the randomness and error that is prominent in everything. But we are less appreciative of the fact that maybe if you're hungry one day, how that randomness can affect your decision on, if you're a judge, how lenient or not you are on people. Like, it is absolutely frightening when you see this stuff and realize that if you have a hungry judge, you're more likely to get a harsh sentence than if you have somebody that is not hungry. From a physician standpoint, that becomes really important because it influences how our interactions are with our patients, and talks about algorithms. And physicians, algorithms, blah, 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 they're the worst things in the world. Well, what they're designed to do is to pull out the noise. And if you don't have to be a slave to the algorithm, but if you understand the algorithm and listen to it, and then you make your judgment using that algorithm, you are likely to come to a better conclusion than just ignoring and say, well, I'm above all that stuff. Because sort of like the I don't have any biases thing. It's like, I'm better than the algorithm. Then you probably don't know what the research is on algorithms, and you probably need to, because it's pretty scary. But anyway, cool stuff. And you should get that book out, man. It's so good.
I know. I need to pull it out. And I have not bought the Adam Grant one. So that one I need to put on effect. as I'm speaking on live right here, I'm gonna write it on my piece of paper.
Well, I would, I mean, if I was going to recommend to like anybody in the audience and say, if you were a little more interested in, and you, well, not a little, you have to be really interested into this, is I would start with Kahneman's book, because it's sort of his life work. He's 85 now, so it's covering like 60 years of research. Every chapter hits a pretty deep and profound way about your brain works. And then once you've read that and sort of digested it, and again, it took a long time for me, then all this other stuff starts layering in on top of it. So I think it provides a really, really good foundation for other books that sometimes we would read and say, hey, that was interesting, but there's a greater depth that maybe we wouldn't have had if without the prior learning.
Yeah. It's interesting as far as who's interested in this stuff. And I've had a conversation with somebody that I've met recently that teaches on emotional intelligence and conflict resolution. And for certain professionals that are not physicians, and I'll just leave it very vague on purpose, but I'm like, so like, what is the, you know, I mean, how do you train people if they don't think they have a problem? And she's like, well, it's required. I'm like, oh, well, that helps. And in whatever industry and section that they're in. Then I'm like, intellectually you can understand stuff, but not apply it to your life. And so what do you think it is? Do you think ego gets in the way? And she's like, yeah.
I almost say it's even more than ego.
Yeah.
Because there's
Are they blinded?
I don't even know it's blinded, because there's a lot of stuff that I know that, but I wouldn't say understand or know to my core, or actually I'm going to use the word believe to my core like I should. Right. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I wonder, I'm like, well, how do you do that? Like, how does that occur? And if it was easy, it would be obviously dangerous, because you could snap your fingers and you could make everybody change like all their behaviors, because then once you start altering their belief kind of structures.
Yeah.
But there is something there, because there's, think about it. If we all know you should exercise more.
Yeah.
But most of us don't take the time to. So, but if we actually believed, and what I mean, not superficial kind of idea, but we're talking way down closer, the beliefs that sort of surround your values, those core beliefs, this kind of structure who you are. And even those should be a little bit flexible, folks, but they're pretty strong. But if you actually, exercise is the thing I have to do, you would do it. And so that's sort of that in this kind of personal development space. That's what I find really interesting, is then how then do we become more aware of this? How do we become more aware of the research? And then how do we start applying it in such ways that we make these fundamental changes that ultimately change who we are? Right, because the person you are today is not the same person that you were 10 or 20 or 15 years ago, not even the person you were a week ago. Every day is a different person. And if we can start then identifying the things that we want to change and then be more intentional about it, we can really craft a much better us. And that's really pretty cool.
Yeah. And there are some people, though, that do not believe that we are different people from a week ago.
I know. And then so that in those discussions with them, it is like, well, how then are we working around belief systems?
Right.
Because that's ultimately is the slow revision of belief systems is important to communication. It's important to change. It's important to personal development. It's important to relationships. It's important to therapeutic alliance. And yet there isn't a whole lot out there under that label, under really belief revision, conceptual change as a way of working with others. At least that I found. If anybody else has found stuff, let me know, because you can find it in different fields, but it's sort of tiptoed and danced around, and there's not a lot on the actual process itself, kind of spelled in that way.
Yeah.
But I do think it's it has huge implications, because there's people that are stuck in those fixed mindsets.
Yeah, I'm related to some of them. And
well, I think we all are, right? And I think most humans are. Right. And we have this idea that who I was at 18. So my son's graduating tomorrow. So I've been thinking a lot about high school. And I'm sure you have people. I know there's people I went to high school with that are still living in high school in their brain.
Yeah.
But you're not you are not who that person was.
Right.
And I guess I brought it up in Think Again, and he was talking about this idea of being able to separate your present self from your past self is challenging. It's emotionally upsetting, but also is more important to emotional development. So the ability to distinguish your past and present selves is actually key to this stuff. And then from me, so always going to come back to pain, and pain beliefs are such a key part to people's current suffering, and a lot of that is rooted in this past self. So then I'm thinking, well, how is it that we can, because so many, just like you said, people believe that they're past and present of the self. If you can start building that space now between what happened occur, that previous version that you were, that maybe either had bad things occur or perhaps made bad decisions back then or whatever, and your present self, and we can pull that space out and change that narrative, it allows people to grow and become their future self and hopefully that's someone that they want to be. And the only way that it can be someone who you want to be is if you identify it, and then we start changing that narrative, and we build that space between the past to the present, and then we can anticipate and start again being aware and intentional behind the actions, so that we can become the better person in the future. And keep working to that better person. So anyway,
yeah, it is interesting when people keep themselves stuck in a way where even if they superficially understand things could be different, they inherently don't believe, on top of their they don't believe in themselves to be able to implement those things. There's insecurities there's just lack of confidence that that's possible, and they keep reinforcing this narrative that is not necessarily the truth, and so they're stuck. Like it, I'm not a psychologist or a psychiatrist or anyone does research, but you can see it happen around you all the time. And if things aren't in alignment with, you've changed before, it can be done, you have confidence, or you have someone that's doing it with you, like you have all those things in alignment, then there's possibilities. But if you don't have that, then you keep yourself stuck, and it's kind of this victimhood, state.
Very much so. And that he starts moving a little bit into like dissonance theory, like cognitive dissonance. And another book, which I know I've mentioned on a past Friday Faves, was Mistakes We Were Made, But Not By Me, which is all about dissonance theory. And I was reading that, and again, one of the things that was really pronounced to me, and this actually directly comes back to what we were talking about earlier with the person you had interviewed or had a discussion with about how do you get someone to actually, like, I call it the emotional belief. Like, we can cognitively know something, but do we have that emotional drive that we actually truly believe in, we're going to pursue it?
Yeah.
And with dissonance is really kind of interesting, is that, again, you can be cognitively aware, but if you don't actually believe in your core, your behaviors are going to revert to those old ones that kind of reinforce that. That has importance if you come from a background where there's lots of trauma.
Yeah.
And because people tend to reproduce the traumatic relationships of their past into their current and repeat it over and over again. And the question, and it isn't necessarily so much of finding the next person, is identifying yourself, why it is that you keep choosing those relationships.
Right.
Yeah, so just huge implications. I think about it like all of us have this, though. Like all of us have these core beliefs that were identified and created when we were kids. I think, like, I was a fat kid. Like, I was a fat kid.
I didn't even know this.
I remember, like, I had the husky jeans. My mom's buying the husky jeans. I was excited when this is going to sound so stupid, when the length of my pants exceeded my waist. That was like a big day for me.
Wow.
Like, I felt big. That identity carried. So even when I started actually exercising in my senior year, my best friend and I were like going to the gym like 3 hours a day. And I've looked at pictures of me from back then. I still, when I was then, I still thought of myself as fat. And I still, even now, I have this kind of viewpoint. I always think I'm probably heavier than I am heavier than I should be. I mean, that's just objectively, I know I'm heavier than I should be. But it's just interesting that these core beliefs that you have when you're little kind of persist. And so I've looked at that, in the cores that we talk about on the podcast: health, wealth, relationships, and self. Each one of those, you can think of, like, wealth. There's another one. I know that I have issues around money. Not profound ones, like I'm not a spendthrift and spend it all over the place, but I do have some difficulties that I struggle with around money, like what is right, charging for things. What is it that, what is a good exchange for value? I think a lot of physicians actually have that difficulty in a lot of ways. Relationships. I was a child that my parents got divorced. It was actually, it was a good thing. I liked, I didn't have no profound abuse or whatever, but just to say I was very happy. And luckily for that one, I intentionally started looking at friends, families who had what I looked at and saw, well, this looks like a happy marriage. Mm-hmm. And then I started modeling behaviors off of those, luckily. But the more we're aware of it, that, so again, that comes out back to this idea of understanding that the past you is not the current you. At least it doesn't have to be.
Right.
And appreciating that so that we can then change into the future is really a profound skill. And that awareness has got to start somewhere. And hopefully you guys, if you're listening to us, you're getting a little bit about that and kind of being more curious about that idea of the past and present self.
Yeah. And to tie it into just like what we had talked about, value-based practice or value-driven practice, and what are your values, like through that process of change, and like that awareness of what your values are, which ones, are you should expand upon, like it's a good thing, take those in a direction, those are things that I think apply to this we talked about a whole bunch of books and a whole bunch of things that have to do with awareness and recognizing our shortcomings. I mean, those are things that you have to be vulnerable enough to face those things. And it's good to reflect on your life. And speaking of that, another segue into what the 100th episode is reflecting on the last year. So our special episode coming up. We'll just focus on the 100th one, is going to be a medley of little trailers of some of the greats of the last year. Of course, we probably won't be able to get all of them in, but we'll pick some that maybe we didn't throw out as trailers, but you can get little snippets all in one episode. So be looking out for that on Sunday. And speaking of Sunday, my favorite is that there's sun out today, and and I really am. My sunroom is a favorite thing because you've had a lot of rain, and we're still going to get more rain for the next week. I feel like we're in Portland, or Oregon. Oregon, anywhere. There's a lot of water or a lot of rain.
Actually, that's not true. Oregon, that would be West Oregon, because Eastern Oregon is Eastern Oregon. Is very dry. It's like high desert up there.
Okay, well, let's call it West Oregon.
Or the valley.
Over the valley. The Willamette Valley?
The Willamette Valley, yeah.
Willamette. See, Willamette. I got corrected.
Yeah.
Yeah, I said it wrong. But that is my favorite thing, is that after we get off of this Friday Faves, I'm going outside and going for a run in this muggy, crazy weather that is finally dry just for the moment, but it's not going to last long. So
right on. So we should put this one close, because as I said last week, my son is graduating tomorrow, so we're actually trying to do a year's worth of cleaning in the next couple of hours before my family gets here, who are all vaccinated. This is so cool. Everybody's vaccinated. Everybody's fully vaccinated except for my daughter, who is 3 weeks into her first dose, so she's 80% protected.
Yeah, and
it's gonna be awesome. I'm like, it's gonna be so cool. So anyway,
get some pictures. It'll be some fun times.
I don't take pictures, so I have to remind someone to do it.
At least have one for the memory.
I know.
Look back on this day.
It's important. So. But
anyway. Well, cool. Well, take us out then.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us on today's Friday Faves. This is the Change Physician podcast. Of course, you can go to join the community at thechangephysician.com, whether you're a physician or a physician ally. As we mentioned earlier in this episode, if you have your favorite things, feel free to comment in them, either on the Facebook Live posts, the YouTube video, or even just send them to us at Dr. Kevin at thechangephysician.com, and we'll read them aloud on a future episode. But invest some time in what your favorite things are. You guys listening and watching are one of our favorite things. And until next week, stay well.
Take care.